So in 2006, I was starting this company up called StockPicker, and this random guy calls me out of the blue and says, this is a great idea. I just sold golf.com, and now I'm figuring out what to do, and I want to be CEO of your company. And so we meet for breakfast, and he describes the breakfast meeting, but he gave me all these ideas, and they were great ideas. So I stole all of them, and they worked really well, and I built up StockPicker and sold it. But then this guy and his wife, they started their own company. Both Mike and Kass, they're geniuses. They eventually sold that company for $800 million. And we've been friends all along, even though I rejected him and stole all his ideas. He probably did much better than if he had joined StockPicker. And they decided to come on the podcast. And not only do we tell some stories, but they share some of their many secrets of entrepreneurship. So here's Michael and Kass Lazerow, two extraordinary entrepreneurs and friends. Here they are.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
So tell me, what are you guys doing? What's going on? There's been like a big change. Now you're all active in social media. You're talking buddy power.
It's you're on to us. Well, it's good to see you, first of all.
Yes, good to see you guys.
It's been way too long. Shame on us. Ever since your story, we didn't want to be seen with you in New York City.
I know you guys
we've been ignoring
abandoned
you.
me.
Yeah, right.
Not true.
We always loved you. But yeah, we're jumping back into social.
You know, our kids are older now, James. So last one's 17. We got one more year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so, look, first off, I am always loyal to anyone who's made me money. You guys let me into your round. Buddy Media, 2007 was the round. Was it August 2007? Something like that?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I was really grateful. And you sold the company. The round was like a $3.5 million valuation or something like that, give or take.
Yep.
And you sold for like 800 million, give or take.
Yeah.
So it was an incredible deal. You guys are incredible entrepreneurs. And are you doing a book now? Like, I know whatever you're doing is not coming out till next year, but I wanted to get you on the podcast as quickly as possible anyway.
Kass, you want to start with that?
Sure. So yeah, we wrote a book. It's called Shoveling Shit, A Love Story. And it's kind of our love letter to entrepreneurs and ourselves. We decided to write this, James, because we've just been saying the same things over and over again to all the people that ask us how to do a startup. What should we do? How do we figure things out? What about pivoting, models, you name it? And we've kept all this information. And finally, we were like, let's just put it out there and try to help as many people as we can.
This is great because so many times I've used you guys as examples. Look, I've even written chapters in books about you guys before we knew if Buddy Media was going to succeed or not. It was a given for me that I was going to succeed right in the middle of the Great Recession because you were so good at pivoting, at handling the worst moments. I mean, you survived through kind of the worst period in our lifetimes in American economic history. I don't want to say you flourished during that time, but you survived and did well. And I remember one time I was meeting with a guy at Benchmark, and he wanted to meet you guys. And so I sent him over figuring, Benchmark, you're going to be having, and you even called me, Mike, and you said, look, we don't need any more venture capital. Don't give people our phone number. Like, you were just so solid. You weren't like floored by anybody. Always very, and look, I'll describe how, like, so Mike and I met, and then Kass later I met you, but Mike and I met because when I started a company, StockPicker.com, kind of a MySpace for finance is what I was calling it at the time. Mike reached out to me and cold called or cold emailed me and said you wanted to meet and you wanted to be CEO of StockPicker. This was before Buddy Media. You were just finishing out you had sold golf.com and you were just finishing out your 1 year you had to stay with AOL.
Yeah, no, I remember the first time I saw StockPicker, I said, this is brilliant. I love this. I got to meet the person who started this. And I have a habit of cold emailing and cold calling people. I still do. So when I love something, I have to meet who's doing it. And so I reached out. You ignored me for a while. Finally, you got back to me. We met.
I ignored you for a while.
You did. But that's okay. I emailed again, and we met for breakfast. I'll never forget this breakfast. You ordered a milkshake and French fries, which I thought was amazing.
I
If you're going to eat
remember
that,
at the Red
why
Flame
not?
Diner on 44th
At the
and
Red
6th.
Flame. And we had a great conversation. I provided some advice, not great advice. You went on to sell it. But we hit it off. We always loved each other. You were very supportive during Buddy Media. Buddy Media was not up and to the right at all times. It was a lot of hard work, took a lot of toll out of our family. And we eventually got over the goal line, and we appreciate all the help. But it was a crazy time because we started it during the great financial crisis. And if you would have told me that Bear Stearns would not have outlasted Buddy Media, I would have bet all the money in the bank. And we had Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers. The world was falling apart, but we had zero revenue when we started. So there's only so low we could go. We just started building, and luckily Facebook grew, and the rest is history.
And just to set the stage, so and also I'm very curious how it was working together. Like, it's difficult often for married couples to work as well as you guys have together. But to set the stage, Facebook was more or less just starting. I want to say Facebook was getting into the public awareness just about a year or so earlier than Buddy Media started. And at the time, it was sort of reminding me of like a kind of organized internet where everybody could have a homepage and it would look kind of the same, and you'd have games on it, and you had, all your friends. It was like this amazing archaeological dig of our lives. Like, here's my elementary school friends. Here's my high school, here's my college friends. Here's my first job friends. And just like when the internet was getting big in the 90s, companies needed agencies to make their internet presence. You guys were going to make like games and other things for companies to use as part of their Facebook presence. That was the initial it was sort of like a Zynga. It was like, I think this was like the initial model. You switched models a couple of times.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Pincus was one of our investors, and we love the game space. We built a few games. You were our number one player of our word game. I forget the name of it.
I know. And by the way, in our next breakfast at the Red Flame, I was telling you, like, I remember saying to you, "Oh, Mike, I have the secret to winning this game." I forget now what you called it, Wordy or something like that.
Yeah, word something.
And you were like, "Do you cheat?" I'm like, "No. Why would I cheat?"
You were so good at it. The leaderboard was like James, and then everyone else a million points below James. We realized early on we weren't good at building games. We knew Mark and the team at Zynga. They were awesome. They were aggressive. They were doing things that we would never do. We were in New York. We started talking to brands, trying to sell them on games and custom apps. And we had a virtual currency called Ace Bucks. We had like 15 shitty ideas before we landed on what we did. And brands just kept saying, how can you, like, we hate your things. We do not want to do what you're trying to sell us, but help us with Facebook. And it was a time that Facebook was loved. Facebook was like, social media it was like AI.
Loved.
Like people were like, this is going to change the world. If we connect everyone on one platform, it's all going to turn out well. Well, fast forward, it's, they've ruined democracy and the mental health of our kids. But we didn't know that. We just started helping beer companies and soda companies and others doing what they did. And eventually we had 8 out of the top 10 global brands.
So that's just it, though, is like you were trying to be this consumer online game company located on Facebook. And when that wasn't taking off and the Great Recession was hitting, you made the excellent decision to pivot to an agency model, which is profitable. And so, okay, you approach Pepsi and say, look, for X number of dollars, we'll figure out your Facebook presence, which is going to be really important. And that's what you did for a while. That was your first pivot.
That's right. We were building custom Facebook pages for the top brands. And as you know, it's very hard to scale when you're doing anything custom, right?
Yeah.
You can't, you're basically eating what you kill. and it just wasn't working. And I
But
think
you
it was
had to do it for that time, though.
Yes. We had to make the relationships with all of the different brands so that they knew we were competent, right? And I think it was 2010, Mike, wasn't it then, when we decided to pivot to a SaaS company?
Yeah, early 2010.
Yeah.
And
And
what was
become
amazing is we had no, there's no tech that let us do what we ended up doing early on. It wasn't until Facebook launched their APIs, their platform, where we actually could programmatically do what our software let us do. To start, it was just how can we be a part of this world-changing technology? Eventually, the answer, because we were open to it, presented itself and we ran with it.
I feel like so many companies, they come up with a model and they can't get that business model out of their head. Like they have to do that or burn up in flames in the process. And what always impressed me is that, okay, you started off doing these games, didn't take off the way Zynga, for instance, took off. Okay, let's take an agency model, which you can always fall back on the profitability of your contracts, but like you said, Cass, it's not scalable. And then you kind of took the recurring programs you were making for every company and sort of made them like you said, software as a service, like a menu. I'm a company. I can have a menu item now, or a menu of things I can do with my Facebook page.
right. And the tools we built allowed them to reach their, consumers, their clients, their customers online. And if you think about these big brands, they have thousands of employees in different parts of the world, right? So how are you going to give them the tools they need to create the messaging to their actual consumers in different languages, right? With different permissioning. And so Mike had this idea, because we were already helping them, to pivot to this model. And we became what brands needed, which was the Facebook Power Tools. That was our big campaign, if you remember seeing that.
I don't, but I do remember seeing your billboards in
Yeah.
airports.
Yeah.
Every airport I landed in is like, oh, are you buddies yet, or something like that?
Every brand needs a buddy. That was our
Yeah.
tagline. Yeah. That was a big play. When I went, we definitely did not have this money, and we went to the board and I asked them for $1 million more than I think what our current budget was about 200 grand to bring back billboard ads, like real print ads in the airports between Thanksgiving and the end of January. Because I thought if I could, we had, what do we have, 150 different competitors at that time, Mike, even more?
Yeah, funded competitors.
Funded, exactly. So how are you going to break through the noise? And I thought, well, no one's been doing this for a long time. Let's do it. And it worked. It was amazing.
How did you, though, like, other than how did you via product differentiate from the competitors? Who would be the main competitors that I would know of?
So there were small companies. I mean, we were the largest company. We exited for close to $1 billion. And then you had a company called Vitru and Wildfire. But you also had small companies that are still around, like Sprout Social and Sprinkler and Hootsuite. And because it was like AI, you had every investor trying to get into these deals, just throwing money at anything that mentioned Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and social media. And so we were able to fund the business, and we were able to fund, most importantly, what you said earlier, the pivots. We just knew in our gut that the first, I think, 3 business models weren't going to work. And when I said we, I mean Cass. I come up with awful ideas and she shoots them down. And
what was the moment when you shot an idea down? Did you argue?
I pretty much told him, this is the worst idea you've had. And I thought Acebucks was pretty bad. You have to remember that, James, the Facebook platform opened up on May 24th, 2007. I know this because I gave birth to our 3rd child. And I was being wheeled in after a C-section, and Mike's on his phone, and I'm thinking he's like telling all of our family, and he goes, I know what we're going to do next. And I'm like, you mean after the hospital? And he's like, no, Facebook just opened up their platform. I was like, oh my God. So we've always had a relationship where we say things totally brutally honest, and we run with it, and we trust each other, I think. And I mean, you've had a couple ideas. Remember that ticketing idea? And I just shot that down. I'm like, we're not putting any resources behind this.
What was the ticketing idea?
Well, we've had before I talk about the ticketing idea, which I don't even remember, it was so bad. I want to get the elephant in the room. It's not always easy. So it's not all like wine and roses working with your spouse. However, when it works, it's great. You have a shared mission, you have a shared purpose. You don't get home and you're like, hey, how was your day? Right? Like you are working on a lot of stuff together, not only the company, but we had 3 kids and 3 dogs. And, it's what we call the imbalanced life in the book. And so we've always fought well. When we disagreed, it's been respectful. It's been, here's why. And after basically Kass being right like 5-6 times in a row early on in our career, I basically just said, she's my, she's going to keep us out of trouble. So just listen to her. She's the operator. She's a realist. And she's done that. She showed us the way. And when I've gotten in trouble business-wise is when, I'm not working with her, or when I make decisions that I don't talk to her.
Take a quick break. If you like this episode, I'd really, really appreciate it. It would mean so much to me. Please share it with your friends and subscribe to the podcast. Email me at altucher@gmail.com and tell me why you subscribed. Thanks. I don't really know when you've gotten into trouble business-wise. When was the time when you've gotten into trouble business-wise?
So we've done about 100 investments personally. So not all of them, as you can imagine, have worked out. Most of the ones that didn't work out were things that I was passionate about that made no sense.
Like what?
I launched, I don't want to like shame entrepreneurs, but a lot of them. I mean, when you're doing stuff in this space, my biggest failure is, to date, I launched a company with an artist friend called Shape Matrix, which is still around. And, we clearly weren't kind of 2 people who should have started the business together. It was based on an invention that he came up with. And Kass didn't say no, but from the beginning, Kass is like, do you really want to start a company with an artist? He created a new visual language based on the 8 basic shapes. And I was fascinated by it, and I wanted to commercialize it. And so we raised 13 million. We spent, I spent 3 or 4 years doing it. And like many startups, it didn't work out. If I'd really tuned into what Kass was talking about, that's something that I probably wouldn't have jumped into.
I think what you're referring to is you can't overlap when you have co-founders, right? And one of the things that Mike and I do very well, and I think that's the only time we really argue, or if I think an idea isn't the greatest and he still wants to do it, is I'm in my operations lane and he's in his kind of visionary sales lane. And when we stay in those lanes, it's amazing because there's 0 overlap. We count on each other. There's no follow through or follow up like, hey, did you do this? Did you not? We're just humming. It's great.
On the one hand, though, both sides are important, right? You need to be able to try lots of things to find what works. Like, and a lot of things that will seem to you, hey, this is worth trying, probably not worth trying, but it's good that you don't know that, because some things that seem to everybody like not worth trying might eventually work.
Agreed. You need to have both. You actually need to have someone who is a visionary and can think about really creative ideas and can pivot when needed. But if we don't have those ideas, there's nothing I can execute on the operations side. So he's the kind of person that wakes up in the morning and will pop his head out of the shower and be like, I have an idea. Like at least 20 times a day, he says to me, I have an idea. And so you need that. Every entrepreneur needs to either be that person or have that person. And then you need to have the person that's actually operating and executing and figuring out if an idea can scale.
And so do you ever get sick of it though? You say like, yo, slow down, Mike. We got to just get $1 of revenues
Does
first.
she ever?
Yes.
Does she ever, James?
I'm the first person to tell him, focus. You've got to focus.
I mean, listen, when you have a lot of ideas, and you have really talked about this, James, right? You write down 10 ideas a day. You kind of have made ideas a practice. Instead of just writing them down, which I do, I think out loud, and I think Kass has come to realize that that's me processing. Where it gets serious is I say, okay, I want to do it. And then she's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like,
Can I tell them about the time? So we were at the very
yes,
end.
you can. What am I going to say?
Yeah,
No.
she didn't wait for permission. She's just like,
And I just was like, I'm going to do it. So right before, I think it was 2005, the end of 2005, before we sold golf.com, we had a house and we worked down in this really small room. So we had both of our computers back to back in this little like tiny office, and it's like a dungeon. And all of a sudden I get this doorbell ring. And so I go up the stairs and there's like 3 pallets of felt, like green felt. And I'm like, I don't think this is ours. And the guy's like, nope, here, it's Lazerow. And I'm like, huh? All right, Mike, I'll let you tell the rest of it.
So I launched a business without talking to Kass. It was called freefelt.com. It was at a time when online poker was new, and it was a lead gen business. I would send you free felt in exchange for all of your information, and then I would sell that information to the online poker sites. And
this free. What am I going to do with free felt if I play online poker?
So if you play online, nothing. But at the time, home games were taking off. And so, a lot of people are like, I don't want to ruin my dining room table. I need a piece of felt. So it was a thing. Doesn't sound like a thing right now, but it was a thing because you had like World Poker Tour starting. Everyone at home was starting to play poker. Let's just say it wasn't a great business idea. And I should have saved the $5,000 I spent on 13 tons of felt.
It was so bad.
But it just shows kind of how I've grown as a human being and a business person over the years.
Were you afraid to tell, like you said, I forgot to tell, were you afraid to tell Kass?
Yes, I've really evolved in my ability to communicate both my ideas and my feelings. At the time, I'm like, if I could just do this and hide the felt somewhere. Unfortunately, it was a room of felt. So I didn't know where I was going to hide this felt. Kass is the operator, as you could see. So the idea that I had like 13 tons of felt that I had to hide in a tiny house, that never crossed my mind. But like all of us, we've gotten wiser over time. And I think that's, the beauty of being an entrepreneur is not just we've always had ideas, but it's putting in just ridiculous amount of work, whether it's on the sales side, on the hiring side. And, I just assumed I'd be able to market well enough to clear all that felt. I also didn't know who was going to put it into boxes and ship it out. So it was like the worst idea ever.
Logistics was not.
I do want to reiterate that you are great at coming up with ideas. When we first met about StockPicker, I literally, you spouted out a bunch of ideas. I literally stole every single one of those ideas and made StockPicker successful because of that. Not 800 million successful, but successful for enough. And so I appreciate that. And I thank you for letting me, and I knew you would be fine with me taking all the ideas because when you're an idea machine, you're abundant in ideas. The whole key is you don't kind of squirrel away your ideas. Oh, I hope nobody steals this. You have a mindset of abundance of ideas, and that's very important.
And I've always been attracted to people who love ideas, and Kass loves ideas as well. Like, it's not that she just, operates. She's a beginner's mind. She loves to learn. But the idea that you can go from 0 to 1, just come up with something and make it happen in the real world. I've been doing that since college, since before I met Kass. And so that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. I think fast forward, we realize that we don't have to reinvent the world every time. And so, really large markets are really interesting because there are people spending money. And you just, as an entrepreneur, put yourself in front of a big pile of money.
I want to ask about golf.com. Like, how did you get that URL? So this was the business before Buddy Media.
So it started as Golf Serve because back in 1998, when we started it, there were no, single word URLs left with the word golf in it. And I had this idea that if you were a recreational golfer, that meant you didn't go to private courses. You had to go back to the same exact public course to get your USGA handicap. And I just thought that was just crap. Like, not fair. And, there's all these amazing recreational golfers that don't have the money or the access, just like Mike and I at the time. And I said, like, we've got to go and start, providing USGA handicaps. And golf was huge. And we started at GolfServe. And then I think wasn't it a part of like an ESPN or CBS?
NBC.
NBC. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So NBC had invested in a company called Quokka Sports, Total Sports.
That's right.
And the company raised $1 billion, went out of business, and they had all these like bankruptcy auctions. And one of the auctions was for golf.com. It was a phone auction. You dialed into a courthouse somewhere. And we were willing to bid up to $1 million for the URL. And we bid $289,000. And we got golf.com and we built it for a few years. And then
wait, how did you get the 289,000 then to pay for it?
So we already had a company. So we had GolfServe, and we'd raised a little money to do GolfServe, and we were operating. And I don't know, I forget if we like put some more money in, or
I think we raised a little and had the money to do this because we wanted this URL.
People, yeah, because we saw it as, it was before apps, before the mobile phone. It was all about URLs, right? Like every ad on the TV said www.expedia.com or www. And it was like you would plaster that. So that's how people found out about websites. And so we went after it hard because we thought that these vertical niches of, focusing on primarily rich people at the time, we were going to do wine and health and fitness and some others, never got out of golf. And then ended up selling that for $25 million to a company that no longer exists called Time Warner. Which is crazy in and of itself that golf.com outlasted Time Warner.
When you sold that, like, was this the first time you guys had millions as a couple? Like, I know you had a public company beforehand, the student video thing. I forget the name of it now.
Yeah.
But was this your first big hit?
It was. So that was the first one together. I'd made a little money off UWire, which we took public as part of Student Advantage. And that's what, most importantly, that's what got us to New York, because Golf Magazine, which was the buyer owned by Time Warner, wanted me to be the general manager of golf.com. And without that deal, I would have never met you, would have never met Howard Lindzen, would have never met Roger Ehrenberg, a lot of the people who have been really important to our lives.
Yeah. And so, I mean, did you go out and spend the money? Like, did your lives change when you first, like the first time you made money and you realized, oh, this is a viable thing for me to do. I'm going to be financially free in this life.
Well, you have to understand, like, and there's a little story to this. When we started GolfServe, we started at September 1998. By December 99, we had sold it to chipshot.com, which was a company that made custom golf clubs out of Silicon Valley. And it was the most expensive place in the world to actually build golf clubs, but they were registered to go public, right? And they pulled that out the following year. And so we went into bankruptcy with them and then had to restart the entire company again. So by the time we had to restart it, we did not own very much of it. Like barely any of it. And what we got out of it was enough to buy our first apartment.
All right. Well, that's something.
Yeah,
that's good.
That is something.
I mean,
yeah.
Looking back, it was a lot for us. And we made $3 million before taxes. So then you pay the taxes and it's like, whatever, $2 million. Then you show up to New York and you're like, wait, apartments cost what? Like public, private school costs what? And so let's just say we didn't feel rich living in New York City. We were very hungry. We had that taste of success without the type of win that we got at Buddy Media. And it just made us work harder, because when you're working with your spouse, you're all in. There's no safety net. There's no, oh, my spouse has another job that's generating income. If it goes Mahola, your life kind of is impacted in a way that if you don't work with your spouse, it doesn't happen.
Well, within a year of you guys starting Buddy Media, the world entered this great recession. There wasn't really, no matter how much people liked you, there was no money available from VCs, I imagine, at the time. And were you worried? Were you scared?
Kass, what do you think?
I wasn't. I know that's going to sound kind of arrogant, but I wasn't.
That's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to.
I just feel like we had a plan. I knew Mike would always be able to pivot us to a model that worked. And if I could hire the right people and keep them there, that was going to work. And that was our mission.
Right, because Facebook was still growing, recession or not.
Yes, exactly.
Facebook was growing, and we raised our seed round. It was hard, but we raised like $1.5 million at, I forgot the valuation. I trust you, $3 million, $3.5 million.
It was about 3.5, yeah, because I think it all ended up at about 5 after. By the way, I don't think you had a hard time raising money. I had to beg to. I was surprised. I heard that you were putting money in from Howard, and I'm like, why didn't Mike call
how
me?
It goes. Like once it tips and you get momentum, then it's like super easy, right?
Yeah.
But it didn't seem like a slam dunk as kind of young entrepreneurs working together. So a lot of people at the time didn't like husband and wife teams. Howard Lindzen was very important. He committed and then, made a bunch of introductions that made it happen. But the valuation really reflected how hot the deal was, right? Like hot deals don't get done at 3.5 million pre, but we just wanted the money to go because we wanted to be fast. We wanted to just build. The good news, our later stage rounds were done in the hundreds of millions. So I think it all evened out and we owned enough of it to be very happy at the end. But it was a scary time in the world. And we thought it was a perfect time to build something because less competition, Facebook was still growing. And if we just focused on our customers, which we eventually found, we would be okay. And that's what happened.
I know, Mike, at some point you dealt with a cancer fear. Like when was this in the timeline?
So my issue has always been my heart. So I have an artificial heart valve, almost died twice, congestive heart failure as a kid. In between my sophomore and junior year of college, I had a new aortic valve put in. So a fake valve. I still have the valve. I think I'm one of the longest living people with this valve because most people get it when they're 70 or 80. I've had it since I was 19 and just turned 50 this year.
Now, Kass, did you think that was sexy? He had this aortic valve in there at 19?
Big time. That was exactly what I was looking for.
Eyes that got it.
I was looking for that, definitely.
And so, and the only reason that's relevant is after that happened, I went from being kind of a stress ball and really, worried about everything to like love and life. I'm like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I didn't die, right? Like, let's go. Like, this is fun. I'm in overtime. And so that fearlessness, I think, really helped me as I move forward through not only Buddy Media, but, to this day in terms of how I operate, which is, you only live once. I shouldn't be alive. Let's do some awesome stuff while we're here.
And so what were some of the things like, so you wrote this book, Shoveling Shit. What are some of the shit that is shoveled and how do you, by the way, it's interesting, we were, I think you were mentioning age earlier. It turns out the average age for successful entrepreneurs is somewhere in the mid 50s. And some professions like mathematicians, the average age for a brilliant mathematician is like 25 for the mathematician's greatest work. But for historians or writers, the average age is 69, actually. And this is I had a podcast guest, Arthur Brooks, who writes about this type of thing. He's very into transitions in life stuff. Yeah, he's a Harvard professor. Jay, what was the name of his book? From Success to Success, or From Strength to Strength? Very smart guy. And but yeah, wisdom. The wisdom of people always talk about like the young, brilliant entrepreneur, but it's really the wisdom of entrepreneurship that drives success.
Definitely. I think Mike and I feel like there's a lot of glorification around being an entrepreneur. And what we've tried to write about in the book is you have to have this like always on shoveling shit mindset that you're constantly going to be shoveling out of some kind of mini catastrophe. You're going to be fundraising all the time. Then something good happens, something bad's going to happen. You're in the middle of the storm, you're coming out of the storm, or you're about to head into a storm. You have to have that mindset. And those entrepreneurs that can actually grasp that and like it are going to succeed, because that's really what it means to be an entrepreneur, in our opinion.
So being able to basically expect those shitstorms, to use the
Yes.
phrase, and not quite enjoy it, but learn how to ride those.
Yes. And have high, stress and distress tolerance. Like you have to know that. Like there's no, we meet so many entrepreneurs, I'm sure you do too, who have great ideas or have an idea and they think this is going to be the greatest thing ever. I'm going to be able to work the hours I want to work. I'll make all this money, all this kind of stuff, all these like interesting ideas. But when you actually start doing the work, it's not like that. You won't miss like big events maybe with your kids or your friends, but you are missing all the like in between. That's like one of the big messages. This is always on.
Yeah, and it never turns off. And I would say 80% of the time, and maybe this is just me, I would say 80% of the time, it doesn't really feel good. Like
no, it's really torturous. Yeah.
And I think we wanted to we've read so many of these books because, we read an entrepreneur books. A lot of our friends have written books and a lot of them glorify it and are a series of just kind of lessons. It's hard to apply. We wanted to write the most honest book of the life of an entrepreneur, not just the business, but the imbalanced life, the sacrifices, the misery. And really what we came out of it saying is that there's nothing we'd rather do. It's both miserable and awesome. And that's why it's Shoveling Shit a love story. It's our love story with each other, but it's also our love story of entrepreneurs, why we've invested in 100 entrepreneurs, why we're so excited to give advice, even when we didn't have money, like when we met. And at the end of the day, there's in a world where people don't have purpose and passion, entrepreneurs have that. Like they show up to work, they're like, wait, what? Like what just happened? Like who just quit? Like what client just left us? Like we got sued by who? Like you show up and it's just like shit hits the fan and you just have to deal with it. And at the end of the day, it's awesome. And the people who do it and who get to the other side start to love it in this masochistic way. They start to love because it's not that people are smarter who are entrepreneurs. It's not that entrepreneurs are any more strategic. Like go to any business school, go to any company, they're really smart, strategic people. It's the people who are willing to put in the work or make the sacrifice, who are willing to basically not see friends, piss people off by doing what they do. And so as we kind of thought about our life and wrote down these 30 years of stories, it came down to, man, this sucks. And it's awesome.
I mean, I think probably you have a higher tolerance for it than me. Like for instance, I remember having this web agency at one point, and then just you get those calls on like Friday afternoon from the client that is most on the edge, and he says, "Listen, you need to call me. Talk to you soon." But it's Friday afternoon, you call, and they've already left for the weekend. So
Right.
now
Yeah.
you have all weekend where you're like assuming you're going to lose this client. And you're gonna have to fire people, and then by the way, then you don't lose the client, but it's just weekend after weekend or day after day. There's always something happening to worry about, and in every business I've ever done or been involved in, it's just a lot of worry. Like, do you ever wish? Sometimes I look outside and I wish I was a professional bird watcher. Like then my job is to take a notebook. I'm gonna, there's a yellow-tailed, whatever it is. And like, you just write down the names of birds and life's good.
Well, we tried that. Like
Yeah, we
after
did.
I left, so after we sold to Salesforce, I went to Mark Benioff and I said, one of us has to get back home. Our kids were struggling. They hadn't seen us in 13 years or whatever it was. We just needed to focus. Like, in your gut that, wow, your family's falling apart. So obviously, like, it was either me or Kass. Kass volunteered. So she got laid off, which was good. Like, Mark treated it really well, paid her all of her stock. Like he was total mensch, which we forever will appreciate.
Sure.
Then I busted my butt for 4 years, and then I was like fat and unhappy and not connected. Like I wanted to be with Kass and the family traveling the world. So I left Salesforce and I said, I'm not going to do anything. Now I play some
How long
golf,
did that
but
last? How long did
so
that last?
I'm a painter on the side. And so I got an art studio.
Actually,
And
Mike,
after a year,
I got you the art studio.
Kass got me the art studio. I don't even know how to
surprised him. Yeah.
I don't know how to get anything. I haven't logged into
It's hard to,
bank
by the way,
account in 20
Mike,
years.
it's hard to get a lease of anything in New York City.
It is. That
I'm
was
sure Kass
really,
got this for
really
you.
hard. Yeah.
And it was right by one of the places you used to live at. So it was at 78th Street.
Oh yeah, I
And-
lived on 78th. I lived at the Apthorn on 78th
Yeah.
and Broadway.
And after a year, I was like, I'm miserable. I fucking suck at art. So it's a hobby. Like hobbies are things you love but suck at. And I'm like, I build businesses. That's what I do. And so we went back into investing, and now we're kind of full on the investing side, and buying companies. And who knows, maybe one day we'll start a company.
Well, investing in companies in and of itself is starting a company. It's a company
Right.
that helps manage and operate multiple companies that you have small stakes in.
That's right.
And then there's a lot of decision making and so on.
And we went after that hard. I mean, we, at our venture firm, Velvet Sea Ventures, we have about 400 million of assets under management. We've done our own investing. And although we do love investing and will continue to invest, what really separated us is our love of being an entrepreneur. And so that's
what are
really
some
what
of the
we're
other
focused on.
pieces of advice you convey to some of your entrepreneurs or to the readers of this book? And I know you don't want to give away, when's the book coming out actually?
March of 25.
So don't worry, you'll be back again in March when it comes out. Like we'll go in depth into the book. But like, what's one or two things?
Well, I think we've touched a little bit on it about the imbalanced life, and Mike says like picking your co-founder is like picking your spouse, right? You basically work married to this person, so you better get it right, because it's awfully hard to divorce someone that you've picked as your work partner, right? Your other founder. We've talked about pivoting. I mean, I think that's a huge chapter in the book that goes over, how do you know when you need to? And I think, like you've said, these entrepreneurs and people get so full of pride. And I think that's why they're not pivoting when they want to or when they should, because they're holding on to an idea. It's ego-based, it's fear-based. We go into that quite a bit. We also talk about marketing and perception as reality, and how you can do this in a very effective and efficient way when you are a startup. And teams. I mean, teams are like a couple chapters of our book, because it's the most important thing. Like the thing that differentiated us were our people, right? It's not just a business model. It's just Mike's idea or how I'm executing it. It's the wonderful people that we were able to hire and field in the right position. I call it money balling, but it's really, you get a lot of velocity and good things happen when you put the right people in the right spot.
I think that's really true. And I think a lot of people don't know how to recognize who the good people are. Like people are such good salespeople that they can convince others, hey, I'm your ideal employee. I'm your ideal partner. I think it's really hard to find the right team.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't easy. And I remember right in the beginning when we started in 2007 and 2008, it was hard to find any engineer. And at that point, we just started buying these small engineers who had apps. So we'd buy their apps and then kind of inherit them. That was one way we did it. But when we think back about Jeff Raghavan, for instance, how did he find you, Mike? Did he Facebook message you?
I reached everyone I knew, saying I need a really great salesperson, and someone in the Northwestern Development Office, Northwestern University's like fundraising team, somehow was connected to Jeff, and then that's how we met.
Yeah, I mean, you meet these people, and if I tell you, like, he's the greatest salesperson I've ever met. So strategic, probably the number one relationship person I've ever met. And
how did he sell your services? Like, because there wasn't like a guy in charge of Facebook for Pepsi Cola at that time. Like, who did he call?
So the way, Jeff and kind of our whole team sold was, Kass and the marketing team would soften the field by we did tons of marketing, tons of dinner events, tons of just events. And we basically had a vision. And the vision was that the world is moving from ads to streams. And this was back in, 07, 08. So it was before everyone was just on Instagram and all these apps just looking at the stream. And we said, you have to adapt, and birds of a feather flock together. And we offered off the shelf everything they needed to succeed with first Facebook. The other thing that we did very strategically is Peter Thiel, who's on the Facebook board, was one of our investors. We got very close with the entire Facebook team, the sales team and the go-to-market team. And so in order to spend money with Facebook, they had to get up and running on software that helped them manage it. And so we became the number one provider, and they started just sending clients. It grew fast. Now, we didn't realize how fast at the time, but we grew from 0 to 50 million in annual recurring revenue in 3 years. So from launching the product to getting to the $50 million run rate, and actually we crossed 5 million in monthly recurring revenue that month. That is really fast. I don't think we've had any companies that we've invested in that did that. And we got there because there was a seismic shift in the world that Facebook was ushering in. It wasn't us. It was every company waking up and saying, I got to figure this out. How do I figure it out? Oh, buy Buddy Media.
And it wasn't a coincidence that happened. I mean, there was people don't remember, there was excitement around Facebook then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, it was, I think, in the summer of 2006. I think it was Microsoft offered Facebook $1 billion, and they turned them down. And I remember writing at the time in the Financial Times, I wrote a column, Facebook was smart. They're worth at least $100 billion. Everybody at CNBC laughed at me because then I went on CNBC to talk about it. But of course, it became much more than $100 billion a few years. On IPO day, it was $100 billion. But
Yeah.
And then what was strategically smart was getting right away in your round maybe two of the most important people in the Facebook ecosystem at the time, Peter Thiel and Mark Pincus.
Yeah, and Ron Conway, who was very close with Zuck and everyone out there. I spent a lot of time on the West Coast building relationships. I felt like if we're going to build on a platform, we really need to be close to that platform, because at any given time, we were one decision away from being out of business. They could have just said, listen, no more APIs, no more marketing platforms. We are going to do that. And that's happened in some other areas. If you think of Twitter shut off APIs.
I remember Twitter, that affected Howard's stock twits.
Yeah. So these platforms have a way of being nice until they're not nice, right? Oh, we love you. Build on top of us until they're really big. And then oh, thanks. We'll take over from here. And so I spent a lot of time out there. And I'm not going to lie. A lot of what we did at Buddy Media was, we did a good job, but a lot of it was luck. Let's just be kind of completely honest. And when I say luck, it's timing. It's everything went our way at a time when it didn't have to go our way. And so we were part of something much bigger. We just happened to be there with a bucket mopping up the money.
I don't think it was luck in the 2009 or 2010 time. Maybe it was, I don't even think it was luck in the beginning, but maybe it was good in 2007, 6, whenever you first had this idea. It was talented that you recognized this was something that was going to have explosive growth. I was so excited the first time I used Facebook because I remember thinking, when would I ever call up my first grade best friend and ask him, hey, how'd your kid do in a soccer match yesterday? Yeah. I would never do that. But now I see these things and everybody in the world can. And it was just an amazing feeling, which doesn't occur anymore for some reason, but it did then.
That's why I wanted to jump in. That's what you just said is exactly why I loved Facebook. Dudes don't love calling other dudes, but we like keeping in touch, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is something else that I think we talk a lot about in the book is networking. And fundraising, right? You never stop networking because you never know where your next dollar will come from or your next opportunity. And Mike was so good about that. It's grueling. He was traveling all over the country, all over the world. But you, as an entrepreneur, you can't sit still and just hope, okay, like I can pick up the phone and call someone. You have to build that relationship. And when you do build it, then there will be people who are interested. And to our delight and surprise, most, if not all, of the people that invest in us are really good friends of ours now. And we're still in touch and really close with all of them. I mean, I think of Karen Klein, and she's, one of my favorite investors.
Who invested on behalf of SoftBank, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's a good, like, going to conferences, I always find to be a horrible networking technique. For you guys, what is a good networking technique?
So I love cold calling.
Like you did with me.
Yeah, and I think if you think about most people, like they haven't made a ton of money, right? And so all you have is time. So instead of watching Netflix, pull up your computer, find people's email addresses, write in through like info@whatever.com, tell a good story, and try. Like these doors will not open up for you unless you try to open them up. And I've always just, when I was just thought about this, haven't written about it or anything. When I was like 12, I wrote to the board of a company called Sallie Mae, Student Loan Marketing Association. I was 12 years old. I said, you have no students on your board. I would like to serve on your board. And they responded. They said, thank you very much. We don't accept seventh graders. That would be illegal. We can't employ children anywhere in our business. And they use like a child labor law to say like why I couldn't be on their board of directors and be an officer.
I like they had
of the
to
company.
like really think about it. Like
Yeah.
they had a meeting. How do we reject this kid?
And so like, I just think entrepreneurs have it. You're an entrepreneur where you will not shame yourself into doing things or out of doing things that are really uncomfortable. Like it's not like, I don't love emailing James Altucher about his company, but I love the company. Like I was just with a friend of mine who started Bonnaroo and Outside Lands, big music festivals, right? And someone asked us, how'd you guys meet? And, Rick Farman, who's at Superfly, invented the Modern Music Festival. He goes, well, I got this like email from Laz who said that he came to my festival with his 2 kids and he created a video about how much fun he had, even though it was 110 degrees and he was sleeping in a tent and almost killed them. And I thought it was awesome. And we got together and I've been friends with them ever since. So people who are listening to this, who are not thinking about who are the people that they'd love to meet, because most people are sitting around like bored. And if they get an email from someone who's like, hey, I really like what you're doing, I'd love to just like talk to you and see how I could help out. Like a lot of people will respond, whether you're Mark Cuban or whether you're Kass Lazerow.
But by the way, as I realize this through my own career, this becomes like a magic power practically. The fact that most people don't realize this, that like a lot of people reach out incorrectly. And I hope in your book, there's ways of reaching out correctly. A lot of people just say, hey, they don't really provide value. Like you provided value. You told Sallie Mae at the age of 12, this is a problem you have from my 12-year-old point of view, and here's a solution to it. And so you have to do that and iterate over and over before one person responds. But that is the way to do it.
You have
I
to
agree.
provide value. Like when I meet with an entrepreneur, the question I always ask is, how can I help? If I can make anything happen in the world, what is that one thing? I can't do too much for you. I got a job, I got a family. I don't want to like, piss them off. But like, what's one thing that if I did for you would really change your business? And that question sticks with entrepreneurs years later. Like big entrepreneurs, like entrepreneurs who like make it.
You remember how Roger Ehrenberg always says it too? Like he can't stand when entrepreneurs or anyone says, hey, can I pick your brain for a little bit?
I know, it's the worst.
It's the worst because it's offensive. Like my time isn't worth it and your time is and all that kind of stuff. The way Mike's gone about it and taught so many entrepreneurs is the right way. Like I have some ideas. I'd love to share them with you. I'd love to help. That kind of mindset is necessary to open doors.
By the way, my equivalent 12-year-old experience, if you don't mind me sharing, is in 1980. So I was born in 1968. In 1980, I went to the Democratic National Convention, which was in New York City, because I told them they needed kids can influence parents. So they needed
Yeah.
like junior Democrats of America, and I was happy to run it for them. And
That's
so they
amazing.
invited me to hang out on the floor of the convention with all the other delegates and stuff. And so I spent the convention there.
Doors can be opened, and it's not, I look back and I love warm intros and, take advantage of them if you can get it. But you need to open your own doors. And I think that's what sales is. Sales is like getting someone to do something that you want them to do without them knowing that you want them to do it.
Now, let me ask you, now, did you write this book together?
Yes, we did. It was an interesting process. You would love this because I had all these ideas that I had written down, and you ready for this, in a spreadsheet, because I think in spreadsheets. And I'd written them all down and kind of built the chapters and ideas, and each cell was like a different bullet. And I go, okay, Mike, I need a little help with this. He's like, I can't write a book in Excel. What are you talking about? This has to be in a Word document. He was mad.
This is like a 2-day discussion. And
well,
I'm like,
but then, how did then you break it into stories and write the book?
So we didn't, we had a lot to say, but we didn't really know what a book structure was because we read all sorts of stuff, and we didn't want it to be just, and so we, like we do everything, we asked a lot of people, and we wrote it, but we had help from someone who's written a bunch of books about like, how should we think about structure? Kass is all about structure. Once we had structure, which was basically 3 or 4 stories a chapter, 3 to 5 lessons per topic, like key lessons, the writing was really easy. And because we have 30 years of material, I wouldn't say it was enjoyable, but we got into a flow that got it done.
Yeah, because you had the stories. So it was a question of dividing up the stories by chapters. And that's something that's very structural. You can do in a spreadsheet. The part that gets a little tricky is, it's like you have a sign behind you right now, Mike, day trading attention. Writing a book is like day trading attention. You have someone's attention. You know you have someone's attention at the beginning of a chapter. Otherwise, they would not have opened that chapter. But then you have to keep that attention. There's a give and take. And it's very important to hold on to it. It's a precious thing, someone else's attention. And I'm sure by the end of this book, you appreciated the importance of that.
And, I went to journalism school. I love stories. Part of like sales, fundraising, everything is a story. And I didn't want, and Kass didn't want, the world's greatest textbook about entrepreneurship. We wanted a very quick read that when people put it down, they're like, that was worth it. I learned something. It was funny. It was fun. I got to know these 2 goofballs. And so I think that's what it is it's a fun read that happens to teach you about, money balling and pivots and raising money and picking a partner and how do you greenlight an idea and how do you kill an idea and all these things that we've just done over and over and over again. It's basically the combination of all of the questions we get from entrepreneurs every day, told through our stories and our love story.
I can't wait to read all these stories. The book's coming out next March. You'll come on again to talk about it, I'm assuming. And everybody should pre-order. Can people pre-order yet? It's probably too early to pre-order.
Yeah, not yet. But then go to kassandmike.com and sign up for a free chapter and connect with us. And we're going to be having some fun. We'll be doing events, so definitely sign up. We want to make this interactive. We love entrepreneurs. So part of this is we want to interact with more entrepreneurs as we, go through the process of promoting the book.
So everybody should sign up for kassandmike.com. And I just knowing you guys, I can guarantee those events are going to be something special and worthy of attending. I will seek to attend. And I do want to mention, when I did write my article, you said to me, Mike, that I wrote it just to be shocking. And now you probably know, having written this book, if you write something just to be shocking, it'll never be good. It won't be good. You have to care about what I did care about what I was writing, and it was important to me.
Now, at the time, you wrote something that's probably the nicest thing that anyone has ever written. about us other than like maybe something our parents wrote us. And, you know, at the time, I think we were in a place where we were in PTSD, but we've taken that with us. And there are a few people who really impacted us in a huge way, kind of how you think and how you think differently. You know, Gary Vaynerchuk, who started his business from our conference room at Buddy Media, he wrote the foreword to the book, one of our, great friends. And we've seen him build his business. We've seen you write like 15 books since we met and do all your businesses. So, part of this book is a love story to you guys for saying yes to us and building that relationship.
Well, I always appreciate you guys. I'm looking forward to the book. I'm looking forward to you coming back on. I know you're going to have some amazing stories to tell. And thanks for giving us this intro now. To be continued.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
having us. I
Love you
appreciate
guys.
it.